he says, Dennis, I don't know if you know this, but it's in the Constitution that we can annex it, and create more states. And I said to him, I'm like, of course I know that. We started with 13. I'm Arizona Family political editor Dennis Welch.
Dennis, fake news Welch. Try to tell the truth.
And this is the Politics Unplugged podcast.
Dennis, if you have a problem with substance abuse, I am more than willing to talk to you anytime you need.
All right, and welcome back to another edition of the Politics Unplugged podcast edition. And our guest today is local pollster Mike Noble, who's here to talk about all things poll-related and, more importantly, spending-related. Because, man, Arizona is going to see a boatload of cash, according to one firm that projects, and tracks spending for political advertisements and whatnot. Thanks for joining us, Mike, and let's just get right into it.
Appreciate you having me, Dennis.
This group is called Ad Impact.
Yeah, they're great. They're a great data source.
Then they estimate, we're getting close to an estimate $1 billion in this cycle is going to be spent. Total politics, from president all the way down to dog catcher. I know dog catcher. You don't.
Yeah, exactly.
But
we're entering the Dr. Evil territory.
Yes,
$1 billion. So
yes,
it's insane.
We totally are. And I want to get your top line takeaways from that and what you're seeing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's interesting. So Ad Impact, great data source, actually one of the few in the country that actually aggregate this data and put it out there. And I find their numbers to be pretty on target. And it was interesting. Last cycle, we saw a record number of broadcast spend in Arizona. And when we talk about broadcast spend, just for clarity, we talk about broadcast, cable, CTV, digital, radio, and satellite. So that's what the 6 categories that encompass it. But it was about 500 million roughly last cycle. It was record number, but again, as we become more of a battleground state, it's actually projected to be about 825 million. Actually, number 2 in the country. The only in a 64% increase from last cycle, but the only state higher than Arizona is actually our nemesis, California. California.
It's always California.
Yeah. All issues.
Well, and that's a little bit of a misnomer. There's a huge population in California, and media, the costs of getting into the media there are extraordinarily higher than it is here. That's
a very good point, Dennis. And by making that point, what that then means is that literally Arizona voters will see literally the most amount of ads in the country.
So my point is, my takeaway was, screw California, the country of California or whatever, rural Arizona refers to Maricopa County as the state of Maricopa, but we can just refer to its own country.
Touche.
But my takeaway was, of all the key battleground states, Arizona is seeing a considerable amount more. I think second place was Pennsylvania, and I think we're going to see $200 million more in spending than the second place battleground state.
Correct.
So why is Arizona so important? Do both parties think that this is really in play? Like the Republicans, they really think they got a shot here at winning, and walk me through that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the driving factors of the why, and again, the money is a key indicator to watch, because if you want to know, hey, what's competitive, where should you be paying attention, what's going to ultimately decide things, follow the money. And so the money indicates why we're seeing such a big uptick is that there's a couple of reasons why. Number one is the U.S. Senate. So the control for the U.S. Senate.
That little race.
Yeah, that little race. The U.S. Senate, which, those are huge big ticket items. The control is incredibly tight in the upper chamber, and Minority Leader McConnell on the Republican side would love nothing more to be majority leader. And so Arizona, whether you look at any of those prediction sites that predict, hey, where's the state? Is it lean? Is it solid Republican, Democrat? Is it a toss-up? Literally all of them have Arizona marked as a toss-up. And so the battle for basically the control of the upper chamber is likely to run through Arizona and Nevada. So you have that one. So point one. Point two is the presidential contest, the big show, as we call it, the big show. And it was interesting with that, last cycle, so 4 years ago, Democrats spent some money in Arizona, but they didn't really spend a lot because basically the thought at the time was like, well, just prior to the 2018 election, every statewide office held by Republicans, so consider very ruby red. So like it'd be like Republicans dumping a ton of money into like Massachusetts. It just doesn't make sense. And so for them, since Biden not only carried Arizona, only by 11,000 votes, but still carried it. But then also they captured 2 U.S. Senate seats, a recent governorship. So basically, Democrats not only emboldened, they are going full. They're all in this time because before they were kind of like maybe we could win, we're possibly. And also the other factor is that the electoral map has changed. So the road to 270, because it's not based on the popular vote. It's based on the electoral college, and ultimately we're seeing that. Florida, for example, they had about a $270 million spend reduction in broadcast spend for this upcoming cycle because Florida's moved. It used to be, very much a swing state, but it's moved a bit to the right. But because of that, that's changed the map, and ultimately Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, and North Carolina are some of the states that are ultimately going to decide it. So the battleground has kind of shifted from the southeast, central, and the Sun Belt is much more important. So basically, Arizona is at its political zenith in importance, and what Arizona voters do not only has impacts for the state, but unequivocally has impacts for the future leadership of the country. Like who sits in the White House, Arizona may in fact be the linchpin that decides it.
Yeah, and also too, I make an argument too. The road for control of the House also comes through Arizona as well. There are 18 Republicans who currently represent districts that Biden won in 2020.
Yep.
2 of them are here in Arizona. It's David Schweikert and Juan Ciscomani, who coincidentally have been very quiet during this government shutdown potential. Anyway,
and Schweikert's district, by the way, I think is going to be the most competitive congressional race in the state of Arizona because not only did Mark Kelly carried his Schweikert's district by about almost 8 points, but also Governor Hobbs carried that district as well. So, and he only won by 0.8%. And so, Schweikert's going to really have a battle on his hands.
Yeah, game on in that district. And I think the Ciscomani district, too. It's been game on there for the last several cycles. Like, it's just back and forth forever. So, it's not a surprise there. I mean, there's going to be a lot of money spent in those races as well. I mean, but talk to us a little bit too. Let's go a little bit deeper into this because this is what the show's all about. It's about getting in the weeds of this stuff, man.
Well, I'll get as deep as you want to go, Dennis. I mean, how much time you got?
All right. Talk to me a little bit about the legislative races as a whole, because I think there is a sense that the Democrats have a really good shot this year. Or this election cycle of finally taking control of one or both of the chambers. Now, one of the conventional ways of thinking over the past 20 years that I've been doing this is that the Democrats can really screw up anything. And they've proved
true.
And they've proved that they certainly can do that. But this year they feel it's different. It seems like it's actually doable when you go through the races. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so basically Arizona, of the 30 legislative districts that we have, the ledge districts, ultimately, there's about 6 that are actually kind of the battleground seats. The remaining 24 are very, very, unless something, crazy happens, like someone doesn't make the ballot or, some existential unique thing that happens, basically, they're going to go R, they're going to go D. So, and right now, the balance of control in the State House, State Senate it's only 2-seat advantage in the House for Republicans, 2-seat advantage for Republicans in the State Senate, and it was the same last cycle. It hasn't moved, but now we're heading into presidential, which you have, turnout is going to be much higher. You're going to have about 8 in 10 voters, probably roughly 80% turning out, but you get more younger voters, more independents, basically groups that are less friendlier to Republicans right now. And so of the 6 districts that we have, 4 of the 6 districts are very are kind of in these suburban areas, and in that suburban shift, so they're higher income, higher fluency, but also that's a group kind of been moving a bit away from the GOP.
So you're talking about again, like how many? So to explain to people who aren't familiar, there's 30 legislative districts in Arizona.
Correct.
So, and what you're saying is, and I believe in the Senate, it's a 1-seat advantage because it's like 16-14. If Democrats take 1 seat, it's even 15-15. They take 2 seats, they take control. Yeah. So just be clear on that. But like, so what you're saying is you see what 4 or 6 competitive
six
competitive legislative
yeah,
districts.
if you want, you said you want to go deep. So
No, let's go deep,
You want to go
baby.
deep. So first one, warning signs in GOP and Chandler. So District 13.
That's Mesnard, right?
Correct. So down there, it's kind of where the Intel and all that stuff. So
It's the 101 Tech Corridor.
Correct.
That people have been focusing on a lot. That it has really changed the political dynamic of
Correct.
that area. I mean, I think, and we're talking about, it's currently held by a senator.
one Democrat, one Republican.
Yeah, in the Senate, it's currently held by Senator J.D. Mesnard. Yeah, and it's a split legislative district.
Correct.
This says a lot.
Yeah, and in baseline, it leans slightly Republican. But what's interesting about that district is that it's about 6 in 10 of the folks there have college degrees. I mean, that's incredibly high. Also, almost half of that district, they have a household income above 100,000. So pretty big, but there's just a massive shift between 18 and 22 of where, they did really well in that, basically that downtown Chandler area. Democrats did well, but basically they shifted that a lot since Ducey's election to Lake's election. So basically, because of that affluent and that tougher class, I mean, Democrats did really well last cycle.
And
there.
education, though, has been a really good predictor for voters, maybe even more so anymore than income, correct? At least that's what I've been reading recently.
Correct.
Like if you're, and maybe explain that a little bit.
Yeah, there's two. Basically, when you're looking at affluency is what we call it among voters. So like how affluent they are. You have, household income, yes, but basically college education or educational attainment has been the probably the most important dividing line in the electorate to look at. And basically Democrats, so since kind of the start of this MAGA stuff that happened, is that the suburban or college educated folks have kind of moved away from Republicans to Democrats. And Republicans have picked up some more, a little bit of the blue collar, but the reality, especially in like low propensity elections or midterms, people with college degrees or people more affluent have a higher propensity to vote than people that are less affluent. Yeah. So kind of the trade-off in constituencies just didn't pan out well.
And I think in recent trends it's trending more. Education levels are more of a predictor of what party you're with. I think it's been, for some reason, educated, higher educated individuals have been moving away from the Republican Party. Whereas when I first started reporting on politics, when you first got in, income was really the dividing line. If you were a wealthy individual, you were probably on board with the old message of the Republican Party of less taxes and lower regulation and get government out of my backyard.
Not the
It's
case.
changed. That's not the case anymore.
No. We're not seeing that because...
And the Chandler area is really a kind of a case study in that.
Correct. And it's been one of the interesting things. A lot of people talk about, because the influx of Californians and stuff to the state. And what's kind of funny, when you deep dive on the census, we actually get just as much influx from California as we do from like the Midwest as well. But the difference is, because you can't pinpoint, the data doesn't get granular enough to tell where in California they're coming from. Are they coming from the rural parts of California? I would bet they'd be Republican. If they're coming from more urban or city center areas, they're probably likely more Democratic. But I think it's more of that because of all the jobs and everything that have been created, which has been fantastic for the Arizona's economy, we've also imported far more people that have degrees, because these jobs, it's not like we're creating a bunch of like blue collar jobs. I mean, these are jobs that you definitely have to have at least a 4-year, a master's or heck, even a PhD. And so again, good and bad. The difference is the GOP has just been tone deaf when it comes to the electorate, because at the end of the day, you just need one more vote than the other guy. And so that's been kind of the issue, and that they've been so, I guess, ignorant, best way to say it, to the data, because the takeaways have been kind of the same, but they're kind of definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, thinking a different result. And by the way, in your other legislative districts, basically the other ones out there is District 2. Again, that's at Scottsdale, Northeast Phoenix area, very suburban. They got one, Republican in the state Senate, one Democrat, and it's a split in the House, one Democrat, one Republican. Also, I'll just rattle off the other districts for you. District 4, so a little trouble in Paradise Valley area. And then also you got District 9, which is over there in that Mesa Tempe area. So it basically crosses over that East Tempe area and then West Mesa area. Yeah. And then finally, what else we got here? District 16, which is a super large geographic district. It starts in the a bit in the the very much East Valley of Maricopa, but sprawls down and cuts through Pinal and even grabs a little bit of Tucson.
So kind of if you're the danger zones for Republicans or the opportunity zones then for Democrats maybe is when you look at this map, think of the valley, around Phoenix, East Valley moving east to a certain point.
Correct.
Is where some of the pickups are in the more traditional established cities, like Tempe, Scottsdale, Chandler. I mean, the further you go out, you get out to like Queen Creek and closer to Pinal County.
It gets pretty red.
It gets very red out there. So the opportunities for Democrats for pickups are out there.
There's another problem there though too. So okay, you got these districts, they're battlegrounds, right? And it's funny, I get interviewed on this stuff all the time, and really the simplest answer is say the GOP's biggest problem right now is the type of Republicans they're putting up. Yes, you can have a very conservative Republican in these safe seats. Great, you'll win all day. But in these, like the Paradise Valley district, like, the one Kate Brophy-McGee was in. Yep. So, for example, Kate Brophy-McGee in that last election where Trump was on the ballot, Trump actually, so Kate ran as a moderate Republican, right? Trump obviously.
Which she was.
Yeah.
I mean, Kate was a solid old school Republican.
Correct. She's kind of like your prototype, like a candidate you definitely, if you could wish out of a genie bottle, that's who you'd want. And so it was interesting that in her district, yes, she lost, but she only lost by half a point. Trump lost that district by more than 11. So, and we see this all the time of like basically these shades of red or these two divisions in the GOP. And that's been really the issue, is that the moderates are really struggling to get out of these primaries because the fact is, in a primary, there are more conservatives than moderate Republicans. So that's the battle, is that in these moderates, so they're getting taken out, and so these more harder right candidates are getting there, but they're getting absolutely throttled in the general election. And so I think really the issue is that the type of Republicans and this whole purity test thing is killing them, because, okay, great, conservative, but like, okay, well, when you don't have the governorship, you don't have the state senate and state house, and they're able to pass whatever they want, it lacks just complete strategy or kind of common sense, frankly.
So, yeah, and it's a great segue because, candidates matter, right? I mean, at the end of the day, they do matter to voters out there. So segue over to another race, getting out of the weeds, going bigger picture here.
Oh.
Word on the street is you have some new polling on the Senate race, the U.S. Senate race.
Oh, shoot, the Senate, yeah. So we pulled this a couple times now already. So back in January, we did a pretty deep dive on it, and then again in like end of July. And what's super fascinating about that is that, when people say, "Oh, the horse race," you can't predict the election this far. I'm like, well, yeah, that's not what we're trying to do.
No, we're still trying to figure out who's going to be in this damn race. Because the only person we really know that is in this damn race is Ruben Gallego. Because the incumbent independent Kyrsten Sinema, she hasn't said what she's doing, and Sheriff Lamb out in Pinal County, who announced, and we really haven't heard much from him since then. He hasn't raised much since then.
Yeah, no shocker there.
But like, so everybody's waited with bated breath for Carrie Lake to make her decision, but as of this week, she's busy with another lawsuit, or at least her lawyers are.
There's a story that was so. All right, so this first off, let's lay out the playing field. And there's that. You're right. It's kind of unsettling. That's what when we tested out early, and I'll get into that in a moment. But just laying it out. So Ruben absolutely running, has no real competition on the Democrat side. He'll end up being the nominee. But Sinema likely to run. I think what she's waiting is just for. And again, she may not run. But if she does, I think she's waiting for Lake to officially throw her hat in the ring. There's an article, I think, out yesterday. 3 sources confirmed she'll be announcing in October. So that's likely coming.
Don't get me started on that.
Yep. So that's that. But I believe that, frankly, is happening.
Anonymous source reporting on campaigns.
Yeah, it's the worst kept secret in politics. We all knew it would happen. It was just a matter of when.
I needed 3 reporters to get anonymous sources to say that someone might run. Come on, wait. Anyway, I don't want to go down that tangent.
And then Sinema, the independent. So I think she's waiting. But what's fascinating is that the Arizona Senate race may be the most exciting because it's normally an RD race, so Republican Democrat, so a 2-way race. What's so fascinating is that now you have this third variable, an independent. Normally independent doesn't matter because third-party vote shares, since its heyday of the Ross Perot days, that was the best third party's ever done. Ever since then, they've not only decreased, they're at their lowest percentage, like, getting 2-3%. A lot of people don't think they can win, but with Sinema, an incumbent, raised money, her track record, but it's this super interesting dynamic where, and I think that's why she's waiting, because when we tested this all out, the whole game plan was, okay, based on how this board is set up, how the field is set up, what does it matter how it's going? So we tested it, if it's just a two-way race, R&D, Sinema's not in there, but then, hey, if she's in there, what matters? And the two big takeaways on it was like, yes, it matters whether or not Sinema's in the race or not. And then the second factor is whether or not, the type of Republican coming out of the primary, because when we tested it, I call it like a Doug Ducey style Republican, or Karen Taylor Robeson, or, more of a Carrie Lake or a MAGA style or Blake Masters, that type. And you saw there's a massive difference. Like, basically, there's no path to victory for Sinema if you have one of those hard right candidates, because no path to victory. It's a moderate candidate. I'm sorry.
If there's a moderate candidate.
It's Friday.
So if there's a hard, let's say there's a hard right candidate.
Hard right candidate's the best thing for Sinema. Basically, there's a path to victory for her because 30% of Republicans just at right now would say, you know what? No, I'm going to go vote for Sinema because she's the next closest thing, because they can't bring themselves a vote for a Democrat, but for Sinema, because she got some Republicans some wins last year, basically, propels those Republicans over there, but it basically completely kneecaps, Lake or Masters or whoever it may be, the MAGA type on that side. But if it's a moderate, you only have like 10% leakage to Sinema, so the Republicans are more consolidated, and basically she has no path to victory in that case. And I actually ran the numbers because people are like, oh, I can't win. Because again, when's the last time a statewide an independent has won in Arizona? Like, I don't even think it's happened in my lifetime. And so like I'm looking at this, and so I did the numbers.
It has not happened in your lifetime.
Incorrect. And so like when we look at the numbers, I did the math, and I'll spare you all the details, but basically there is literally a path to victory there, but it really hinges on whether or not a MAGA candidate's in there, because if Lake or Masters in there, I believe they will absolutely win the primary. And so that's really the difference. But so to tell you like why it's so interesting of the type of Republican, so in our poll, and this is the most recent one in July when we gamed it out again, Ruben Gallego versus Carrie Lake one-on-one, it's 45% Ruben, 35% Lake if the election was held today. In that same poll, we asked a generic ballot question like, hey, in elections in general, you vote in Republican or Democrat? And that's even before we asked this question. In that generic ballot, it's R plus 5.
Yeah.
So R plus 5.
Not surprising.
But then you get asked against this Republican and Democrat.
Yeah. Candidates matter.
Yeah. Ruben's 5 points away from 50. So like, and she's getting crushed with all these key moderate groups. But then once you throw Sinema in the mix, it's 34 Ruben, 26 Sinema, and then 25 Lake. So basically, the three-way race, it gets fuzzy, but also she's really pulling from Republicans. She pulls a little bit from Democrats, but not as much because she has burned some bridges there and does great with independents.
But Ruben's the winner of both three-way race and the two-way.
Yeah, basically Ruben has the edge in all of them, but in the three-way race, definitely, because here's the fact. You have basically our electorate in Arizona, it's about 1/3 Republican, 1/3 Democrat, 1/3 independent with a slight edge to Republicans. So when slicing that pie up, you got Republicans not consolidated. They're getting siphoned off. Democrat, basically Ruben just needs to hold his base and just attack the heck out of Sinema. And basically he's, because of his base sticking with him, he's got a bit of advantage. But Sinema, there is definitely a path there, but it's going to be a wild race.
But if you're Sinema, if you're Lake, if you're really going to run in, don't you want to? I would think you would want to jump in as soon as possible at this point, because Ruben's been in, he's been in this all by himself. He's defining himself the way he wants to define himself.
Yep. He's
and those numbers will change once he starts getting attacked. And, but as it stands now, Ruben is making this first impression with voters who may not know him outside of his district. And that first impression is really important. But he's had the game all to himself for months now.
Yeah. No, I mean, and personally, I like Ruben, but in politically, the facts are, he's kind of like the AOC of Arizona, but branding wise, you're right. If you ask people, hey, what do you think of Ruben? He's like, oh, he's a family man. He's a veteran, this, that, and the other. He's for Arizona. Again, totally different. But this is basically, and this is what's so crazy, is that Sinema literally wrote this playbook, because prior to Kirsten Sinema, Democrats couldn't win statewide for the life of them. And her brilliant strategy was like, hey, plant your flag in the middle. And, because they really don't have competitive primaries on the Dem side. Republicans always do. So you plant that flag, they're able to build up that armor. And so when the attacks come, and then literally Mark Kelly copied that playbook. Hobbs did as well. And then Rubin, who actually is not a big fan of cinema, is literally copying that playbook as well.
Not a big fan. That's how diplomatic of you.
I'm nonpartisan, so I try to be cool with everybody.
It's a very diplomatic way of putting it.
But when you look at the case study of just last cycle of it was 2 cycles ago with Kelly versus McSally. Kelly, same dynamic. McSally had to go through that primary against Kelly Ward and all that competitive. Kelly didn't have it. He had the cash advantage. So basically, he's running all these ads. He was able to define himself while they're battling out. So when finally the election came, the last 3 months of the election, they hit him with their hardest hit, which was the China Kelly stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, yeah, I remember that.
So China Kelly, right, comes in. We saw in the polling that basically made the race from Kelly having an advantage to like that race basically being really even or tight. So he dropped like 4 points. But those people didn't go over to McSally. It just basically gave them pause. But then a month later, those people just basically went back. So it's kind of like, hey, China, like, ooh, I'm not sure about this Kelly guy. But then I don't really believe it. And again, that's the issue also as well.
Well, and the issue is too with, you said, with Rubin, you just described it as the AOC. I think a better comp might be closer to Mark Kelly. He's got a compelling story.
Yeah, no, great story.
Nobody's got a more compelling
vote
story.
Record different.
Their vote records are different, but nobody's got a more compelling story in politics, probably in the Senate, than Mark Kelly. How many of them been to space?
Who doesn't? Yeah.
Fighter pilots.
Yeah, she's like, I'm a fighter pilot. It's like, I've been in space.
But Rubin has got an interesting, compelling story.
He does.
Growing up, poor in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Making his way to Harvard, fighting in Fallujah in Iraq, a foreign vet. It's a compelling story.
He's playing it smart.
And again, back to this idea of that candidates matter. That kind of stuff does matter with voters now, where it's such an emotional feeling.
Correct.
We were joking before we started reporting. It's like there's no discussion of policy anymore. In these things, it's just all politics.
It's
it's like. It's like marketing to the nth degree, because it's all about creating a positive vibe for your candidate, and these stories do help with that.
Correct. And they like you, they'll vote for you.
And again, he's been able for months now to he's in the arena all on his own. He's able to define himself and introduces people out there. I think it's a very powerful, a good starting position for him, even though a lot of Republicans like to dismiss him, saying, yeah, he's too far left.
It was true, but again, based on, think of it from a context of a marketing side of branding. He is basically, for the next 6-7 months, all you hear of all these great things, right? But then for 2-3 months, you hear all these negatives. Here's the problem is that, again, that armor is already then so built up. And again, based on pace historics, unless Republicans attack early, which they haven't done in the elections yet, and I don't see them doing that, but they do. I think they got a shot, anyways, the race is crazy.
Well, we're gonna have to wrap it up right there. I think we went over. Darn near 30 minutes there. So anyway, I just want one more question with you. Yeah. Colin and I are big fans of pop culture and things like that. So I'm asking you something I have not prepared you for.
Oh, awesome.
I want an honest answer here.
Oh, great.
So when you're working late night and you need a pick-me-up, what's the song or what's the band you go to?
Oh, that's funny. I was literally up late last night working, and I just played the song. Played it over and over again like 12 times. But just recently, I put on a Skid Row 18 and Now, or 18 and Live. What is
18 in Life.
18 in Life. Again,
wow.
I was born in 84. Wow. Give me a break. But yeah, Skid Row. It's a great beat song. I recommend it to anyone like that. But it just, anyways, gets me fired up.
Colin and I will discuss that afterwards.
Really? Are you guys Skid Row fans? Okay. Well, anyways, yeah, again, judge me all you want, but it got me going, and I got it done. So.
All right. I appreciate that. Thanks for the honesty right there, and thanks for stopping by here.
No, hey, thanks for having me, Dennis.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. All right, welcome back to the podcast where, as always, Colin and I have a little discussion about, what we just heard, politics in general, and Probably something to do with pop culture. So takeaways from Noble's analysis of where the state of Arizona politics kind of plays right now. I mean, the focus of obviously of the conversation went into like the kind of political spending that we're expecting here in Arizona. But
And it's
other
crazy.
takeaways, it's nutballs.
Yes. The fact that we're up there with California, which has many, many, many times the population that Arizona has, that's nuts.
Yeah, and again, I brought that up there in the conversation. I think when you see these top line numbers, you got Arizona, $821 million, and I believe California just over $1 billion. But I mean, when you start comparing costs, I mean, if you're buying ads in Southern California or in the San Francisco market, I mean, that gets really, really pricey.
Yeah, the LA market is huge.
Yeah.
And Phoenix is a big market, but it's not. The ad rates are not what they are in LA.
Yeah, and then you combine that again with another very, competitive, all-important Senate race. And I think what's going under the radar right now is you do have two very crucial competitive congressional districts here in Arizona with Juan Ciscomani, who's the incumbent in the Southern District of Southern Arizona, and David Schweikert up here in the kind of the Fountain Hills area. Crucial if Republicans want to hold on to control of the House, or if Democrats want to, regain control of the House. So I think that is really driving those spending. And the thing we didn't get into is how much money is going to be spent on the abortion access initiative, if that does end up on the ballot, which is going to be huge. Yeah. And we've also got a big, potentially another big, ballot measure that's being pushed to get rid of the Arizona primary system in general.
And I'm curious to see how that one goes, because it's a substantial change.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was something that a lot of people would like the result, but it's also a dramatic enough change that I could see people getting really nervous when they look at that on the ballot.
And I'm wondering too, because according to this ASU study that was done in July, 80% of voters want a nonpartisan primary.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if the mood of the electorate will be next fall, 2024, like, screw it, let's do away with it. Let's try something different.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there is a technical reason can explain some of the polarization when you look at most districts on the congressional level, the legislative level. They're non-competitive in the general election, and primaries ultimately decides who ends up holding that seat. So if you're in one of those districts, all what you're worried about is playing to their base, your core Democrat or Republican supporters who vote in those primaries, because they're the ones that decide your fate.
Right. It's going to take a huge educational campaign.
Yes.
For that thing to pass, because it's an interesting idea, but to get people to understand it and be comfortable with it. Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting to see who opposes this. On the TV show that we do before this, some of the guests on the last segment were saying, well, both parties are going to oppose this. Okay, where are they going to get the money to oppose a campaign of this size? Because I feel like, and I haven't gotten into too much of a discussion yet, but I feel like, when you look at the people who are behind this initiative to get rid of the partisan primaries, it seems there's some signals that the business community could be behind this. And if that is the case, they are not going to want for money. No. And the Republican Party right now is broke. And they have a lot of other things to spend money on. Yeah. Like they have candidates, and they have the abortion race, and they can fight this, but it's going to be an expense for them. So real quick, wanted to move on to and just ask you first foremost. I mean, like over the past week, is there something that has popped up with you that you think has either been underplayed or something that's stuck with you politically that you've seen this week? The thing that has struck me this week more than anything else, and I have very little expectation of Congress. I think you're in the solid majority of America. I probably am. I don't really expect them to get much done, and I expect to see a lot of things that make me angry just because they're dumb. But when you hit a point where we are now, where we're getting very close to a government shutdown, and
there are real stakes for the economy in general, but for a lot of government employees, and the shutdown can be fairly catastrophic for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so this week in Congress, we've seen the questioning of Merrick Garland, where he was questioned about conspiracy theories, grilled over conspiracy theories.
Yes.
We had Pete Buttigieg grilled over he travels too often as transportation secretary, and
the transportation secretary
travels a lot.
Too much,
and it built into a gotcha question of, can't you take some of these flights commercial? And the answer was, well, I take virtually all of them commercial. You have the whole John Fetterman
that was
dress
good.
code.
That was good.
Yes, his response was very good. And
how did he refer to them? How did he refer to them? Do you want to say it?
Go ahead, you had, because I'm trying to remember what it was.
Was it Jagovs?
Yes. That was in fact
when because they were questioning,
and he said he'd go ahead and put on a tie if that would save democracy. If they can come to an agreement on the
budget.
On the budget,
he'll wear a suit on the floor and save democracy.
And like I get that the hoodie and shorts on the floor of the Senate would be a bit much, and he hasn't actually gone onto the floor of the Senate. He tends to vote just off the floor.
Yeah. Because
he's wearing a hoodie and shorts, and it's probably not
it's
too much to expect him to occasionally throw on a blazer instead of the hoodie.
It's like the Bill Belichick dress code. It's the thing he adheres to.
Yes.
It's not great.
Yeah, it's not great. It just feels like there are all these side issues and people putting on a show, and people who are elected who are just there to try and go viral or get a clip that'll play well on a Newsmax or something. And my God, can you try and get just this one thing done?
Well, yeah, and meanwhile, you've got like this big thing called the government, the government budget that they have to pass.
Yeah.
And they couldn't even get the defense authorization bill through. And the people that were leading the charge on that were, two Arizona congressmen, Andy Biggs and Eli Crane. Eli Crane's a former Navy SEAL, and Arizona's got a rather significant military footprint. There's a lot of bases here.
Yeah.
And the F-35 fighter, I think they just announced they just trained their 2,000th pilot on there or something like that. I could be wrong. Fact check me on that. But if they're affected, you can talk about supporting the military all you want, but what you're doing is, if this goes into government shutdown, they're considered essential. They cannot stop working. They will continue to work, but won't get paid until afterwards.
Until it's over.
So depending on how long that goes, they're not going to be able to, depending on where they're at, they're not paid much anyway, our military members. Are they going to be able to make rent?
Right. It'll be a nice check at the end, but you still have to make rent before it's done.
Yeah, so you're placing undue hardships, I think, on them to prove some point on spending.
Yeah.
And I just
and in the meantime, spending time on just frivolous crap like the way John Fetterman dresses.
Yeah, and taxpayers pay them about $172,000, $175,000 a year to argue about dress codes.
Yeah.
So bravo.
Yeah. So that was mine.
So the thing that I think stuck out with me, and I've talked to you a little bit this week, was last weekend we saw Kathy Herod. She's the head of Center for Arizona Policy, very anti-abortion.
Yes.
This group has quite a lot of followers. She's been communicating to them for years. Big influence in Arizona politics. And last week, former President Donald Trump was giving an interview on Meet the Press, I believe, and would not commit to a federal abortion ban. And at this point, Kathy Herod takes to Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it and says it's time to move on from Donald Trump. And that's interesting. I think that's a very significant moment, particularly if she holds on to this position through the general election. If Trump becomes the nominee, and it really looks like he's going to be the nominee, where is she? Does she hold this position? Does Trump change his position on this? I don't know. But if status quo, if nothing changes between now and November 2024, and Trump is the nominee, I mean, that could cost him some votes in Arizona.
It absolutely
they may not they may just not vote in that race. They may not vote at all.
Right.
Her followers, her people, like, the people that she has influence with politically. And if you're Donald Trump, the last thing you want to do is cost yourself any potential votes in the key swing state of Arizona. It's the key swing state by almost every measure. That's why we're seeing more money spent in this battleground state than any of the other battleground states. Because, again, California, not a battleground state. It's just an expensive state.
Yeah.
So why? So it could cost you there.
Yes.
And
there is a core group of voters where that isn't the anti-abortion voters, where that's not something they're going to compromise on.
No.
It's an absolute. If you are not strictly, staunchly anti-abortion and will go as far as you can to uphold that line, they're not going to vote for you.
No.
And that's typically a group that the Republicans can count on in that race. And if they're sitting out the presidential race, that's a problem for Trump.
And you're right. You don't compromise. I mean, if you truly believe, and many people on the anti-abortion side believe that it is murder, you're not compromising.
Right.
You're not. You don't even want a 6-week ban, or 15-week. You don't want any of that. It should be outlawed because you're preventing murder. And if you're a candidate on that and you've got those, it could cost you some votes, and it doesn't need to cost you many votes in Arizona to cost you a crucial election.
Right.
Anyway, I'm tired of talking about this political crap.
Yeah.
Can we move on now and discuss the
topic
du jour? Or the
also,
topic
did you want to talk about Mike Noble's music choice?
Oh, yeah. Did not have him pegged
No.
for a Skid Row on repeat.
Clean cut fella.
It's a very clean cut.
I love
handsome gentleman.
I love it when we get answers like that.
Yes.
Because that's I wouldn't have guessed that.
No.
And it's not my choice, but good for you, man.
I don't know what I expected from him though.
No, I don't know.
I wasn't expecting.
But it wasn't Skid Row.
No, it wasn't Skid Row.
Yeah.
But also Skid Row, the same song on repeat.
Yeah.
Bravo,
that's a commitment. That's a commitment. Yes.
Like bravo, man.
No,
Bravo.
absolutely.
Bravo.
Some thumbs up. So the topic for us this week: best movie soundtracks.
Yes, I did not do my full homework, so I have a list of my top 5.
Right. I have my top 10 and stuff that just missed, and I even got my wife and my oldest son involved. They had picks.
You're so much better than I am.
I did. I love stuff like this. All right, so I think we both did this. Eliminated concert movies.
Yeah, that's
because it's not fair throwing like Stop Making Sense into this because it's a different animal and that was Stop Making Sense is brilliant. But otherwise, I've got a top 10. You've got a top 5, and there is significant overlap.
I know. Well, you go first, and then I'll just back everything up because we've already discussed that 4 out of my top 5 are in your top 10.
So, yeah, only missed on 1. Number 10, this was actually a suggestion from my oldest son, Nick, Pulp Fiction.
Oh, yeah, nice. That's a nice one. It's got some good, like kind of rockabilly vibes.
Yes, it's got the great Chuck Berry
surf
song.
vibes.
It's got Miserlou by Dick Dale.
Yeah.
Dusty Springfield, Son of a Preacher Man.
Oh, yeah.
Great stuff. Anyway, number 9, suggested by my lovely wife, Allison, Saturday Night Fever.
That's a good one.
It is. It's you gotta be able to stomach disco, but if you're okay with disco, it's
by the way,
greatest
the
hits.
opening scene of that movie is still
it's absolutely one of the best.
Awesome.
Yes.
Opening scene is just awesome.
Just John Travolta walking down the street carrying some paint.
Just
strutting.
Some swag.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you haven't seen Saturday Night Fever, you could absolutely go in assuming it's garbage. It's not. It's a good film, and it's a lot of fun. Anyway, number 8, Repo Man. Iggy Pop.
You can't.
Yeah. Fabulous.
Most things Iggy related musically.
Yes.
Musically are amazing.
Yes.
I mean, there's some issues with his personal life, but
And,
we're not here to discuss that.
His clothing
Lack thereof.
Number 7, I'm a sucker for a good blaxploitation soundtrack. Trouble Man by Marvin Gaye. It's a great soundtrack.
That's a good soundtrack.
Number 6, The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. The Wes Anderson films always have great soundtracks. Life Aquatic is primarily a Brazilian guy doing acoustic versions of David Bowie songs in Portuguese. And they're wonderful.
It's a strong pick, dude.
Yeah,
That's a very strong pick,
yeah,
man.
I was happy when I remembered that one. I might have a little low. Number 5, Valley Girl. Of the various 80s movie soundtracks, that to me is the best. I love the Plimsolls. They have 3 songs on the soundtrack, a couple by Josie Cotton. It's a great soundtrack. All right. Number 4, Purple Rain.
Okay.
I
Can't disagree with that,
We
as you'll find
complained
out.
about
Well, you didn't like the movie, but
the
it's a
movies-
different.
like I said last week, the performance segments are great. The story is generally not great, but the music's amazing.
Movie. The plot, come on, boy meets girl. They go to a lake. She tricks her. Anyway,
He punches her.
oh, that's right.
Yeah, it's
Oh
uncomfortable.
yeah, I forgot. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Boo
All right.
that. Boo
All right.
that.
Number 3, Superfly, Curtis Mayfield. It's a great.
That is,
It's a great soundtrack.
dude, it's so good.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Marvin Gaye's also on that one, and just a strong soundtrack.
Number 2, Singles.
Yes.
It's pretty much a who's who of Seattle in the 90s or before, because it's even got Hendrix on it.
No.
But Pearl Jam, Soundgarden. I think Soundgarden's on it. I know Chris Cornell's on it. Wood by Alice in Chains. Screaming Trees.
Yeah.
And
even the Hendrix song that's on that soundtrack, it's not like his most popular one. It's a great song, though.
Great song, and it's not Purple Haze. It's a much deeper track, and it's terrific.
Yeah.
Number 1, The Harder They Come by Jimmy Cliff. The Jimmy Cliff movie. It's got Jimmy Cliff. It's got Toots and the Maytals.
You got me sold on that.
Yes.
For those who don't know me,
it's tremendous.
I do enjoy the reggae.
Yeah. All right, so let's go to the top 5. That's a whittled down version of my top 10.
I mean, it's basically the same. I mean, I'm gonna go. I'll save the one that's not on your list for last. This probably would be my favorite because we've already discussed this band before.
Yeah.
I'm gonna Singles was on my list for obvious reasons we just discussed. Repo Man, come on.
It's wonderful.
Purple Rain.
Yeah.
Superfly.
Yes.
The one on my list that didn't make your list, and I don't know why. I don't know if you have something against this band. But Rock and Roll High School with the Ramones.
With the Ramones.
And the soundtrack has more than the Ramones on it. It's Chuck Berry's in that soundtrack as well. Great soundtrack.
Yeah.
Go check it out.
Yes. Not necessarily the best movie.
No.
But the soundtrack's terrific.
That's not the criteria we're judging this on.
No, it's not. No, there are plenty of bad films on both of our lists, I think. But great music.
Yeah.
Well, all right, Colin, unless there's anything else you want to chat about this week, I think that's about it.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see you next week.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening. You can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, the Google Store, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. See you next time.